Welcome everyone to a fantastic show tonight on the lockdown tactics. This week we've got one of Sky's top pundits and an incredible footballer, first and foremost, and he is incredibly handsome. And when I think of that, he is everything that you'll know, Boydy.
Well, to be fair, you've got one of Sky's top pundits every week with you, but I must say, you've pulled it out of the bag.
You've pulled it out of the bag this week. I'll give you. This is a cracker. I'm really excited for it. Tell us who we've got.
It was a bit of teamwork. But I'm really looking forward to this. Welcome to the lockdown tactics, Jamie Redknapp.
Good to see you, boys.
Jamie, all right?
There he's there.
Yeah, I'm good.
We'll go into the mental health aspect in a minute, but if we go all the years, back a few years. What with the shooting match? Honestly, how many walls do you think you were on? Posters up and down the UK. You were the original pin-up boy, weren't you?
You were on mine.
Forget Beckham, Giggs, Lee Sharp. You were the original. How many walls do you think you were on up and down the UK?
I love it. This is the best intro ever. I could talk about this all day.
Your head might not fit in the screen after the end of this.
Oh, no, boys. No, it was good times. When I look back, and it's been quite nice actually during this period because we've done a lot of. Obviously, people are reminiscing right now, talking about moments in your life and great games. And we had Kenny Dalglish on this morning on Sky, and we're talking about sort of like the '95 when they won the league, and you start to remember actually, you did play and the enjoyment that you had and played against some great players. And it's like you guys, you think back about your career and how lucky we are to have done what we have, travelled the world, played against some great players. Amazing experiences, because before you know it, it's gone, and you just got to enjoy it, and you got to savor those moments and make the most of it. I was lucky in so many ways. Injuries were a bit of a problem you had to deal with. Maybe we'll talk about that later, but we are incredibly lucky boys to have done what we've done. And
see when you go back to the start of your career and the older experienced guys in the dressing room. By the way, your career it'll fly past, it'll be over, and you think, yeah, okay, but it does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, when I was at Liverpool and my first day, some of the great players, Stevie Nicol and John Barnes, McMahon, Whelan, legends that I had on my wall. And then I remember John Barnes saying, enjoy this. I was a 17-year-old kid who said, because it will fly by. And before you know it, your career will be, you'll be over, or you believe in Liverpool. And it does. You just think that you're going to play forever. Your life's going to, you're going to be in the spotlight and everything's going to go so well. And there's so many ups and downs, as we all know. And things catch you unawares, like what's happening now, and you've got to deal with it. You've got to roll with the punches, and it's not easy because we all have our, moments, our demons, and but we're incredibly lucky to, because I think, for the three of us as kids, I could only imagine we wanted one thing in our life, that's to be a footballer, and to achieve that, it does mean so much, and so much pride for your families and mine as well.
Jamie, see, you just said there a minute ago about the older pros give you that little bit of advice and stuff, and I felt as if in my career, I said this to Boydy many times, the penny didn't drop and the advice level didn't come in with me until I actually went down south till I was like 19, 20, I went to Leeds United. And do you feel as if because of your old man that you had, a little insight into how it would be getting into the dressing room?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I was incredibly lucky because, in one way, I think some people can maybe accuse, when I was a kid, nepotism, and you might have got ahead of the curve because you had a famous dad, or in a way it made it a bit harder for me because every time I played a game, I was Harry Redknapp's son, or I was Frank Lampard's nephew. There was always expectation. People were, first thing they were going to do is look at you, so you had to take that on your shoulders, which sometimes there was that brought a sense of nerves and a sense of people always on your case, if you like. But I suppose that made me a strong enough character to make it. But having my dad there, just as someone I could just bounce ideas off, or if I was a bit low, because signing for Liverpool as a 17-year-old, leaving Bournemouth, which is a small seaside place, to go to a big city like Liverpool, you guys in Glasgow, it was a big thing for me, and I struggled at times, I really did. But to have my dad there, and just someone that knew the game, knew the pitfalls, it really did help.
Well, that Dan Fletcher spoke about that, didn't he, Boydy? When it was like just having his dad there, and he hadn't really been in the game, but just to have that, that voice there as such, Jamie, to try and bounce things off, and your dad's your worst nightmare, and he's always going to give you the other side really than the positive. He's always want to try and say about the negatives you've done. But I think just to have somebody there, it's a big factor.
Absolutely, Snoddy, and also not just a good. I could honestly say, I mean, my dad and I probably had about 2 rows in our life, and they've probably been in the last 5-10 years, if I'm honest. We've been best mates. I've been incredibly lucky to have someone that he's super bright. He doesn't really. He pushed me as a kid, but he didn't. I suppose I don't know what. Obviously, I can't talk about your childhood, but I didn't need pushing. I didn't need to be told to go in the garden and practice. My dad almost had to drag me out the garden. Yeah. So I had such a great relationship with him, and he was a brilliant. I think what you see is what you get with my dad. He was just so incredibly, kind in his time. He used to take me everywhere, and look, it certainly did help my schooling, boys. That's for sure. I mean, the amount of times we go and say, "Look, we're going to school now." And this is God's truth. I mean, I didn't even realise the other day. One of my mates said to me, "I've just been doing some research for a book growing up about in football." And he said, "So I missed 1 year. I missed 57 days or something like that from not going to school." I mean, that's not right, is it? I mean, my dad would take me to training at Bournemouth. I can't read and write, but it's great I can play football.
see, you mentioned something earlier there, Jamie, when it was always it's Harry's son or Frank's nephew. How annoying was that for you, having to prove to people, no, I'm Jamie?
It probably. In fairness, my dad had a reasonable career. Like he was. I think what people don't realise about my dad is the amount of people that I've met in this ever since I was a kid that played with my dad at West Ham. They always say they cannot believe my dad made a manager because he was an absolute lunatic as a player. he used to gamble all his money away as a kid, so he had no money. He'd always be the one that be in trouble. We'd always say fall out with a coach. So I think what my dad did probably was thought, don't make the mistakes I made. So he was always really, good in that respect. And I didn't have a lot to, live up to in terms of his career because he had a really good career, but he sort of, he played lower leagues. He played obviously the equivalent of the Premier League with West Ham, and then he went down to Bournemouth. But I think one thing I didn't want to do, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to sign for West Ham as a kid. They wanted me to go there, but I was adamant. I don't want to go anywhere near where Frank went. I didn't want to go anywhere near where my dad had played. I thought I'll go to Bournemouth, and then once that happened, it was like I need to get away, and that's when at 17 I signed for Liverpool because I just thought no one could ever say that's because of your dad, because it was Kenny Dalglish signed me, and it was just all on me to either make it or not.
Jamie, see, touching on that there, you says about with Liverpool, you moved away from Bournemouth and you found it difficult at times. No disrespect to Bournemouth, but to move as a teenager to then go and sign, with a club the same stature as Liverpool, it's that must have been tough for you.
It was, especially because I was a little bit of a homeboy. I was incredibly close to my mum and dad, and one of the reasons why I left Tottenham really, well, there was two reasons. One, I thought that I didn't think my pathway would be right as a 16-year-old, which is a brave thing to do. We make decisions at a very early age as footballers. And I felt that if I played at Bournemouth, I'd get in the first team and then maybe see what happened. And then 6 months into my time at Bournemouth, Liverpool wanted to sign me. And I remember saying to Kenny Dalglish, I'm not ready yet. I want to establish myself in Bournemouth's team, and then I'd love to come to play for Liverpool. Which is, looking back now, I mean, I spoke to Kenny as a 46-year-old this morning, and I'm still nervous of him. And I had the confidence of a 16, 17-year-old.
To say, no, you give my knockback.
I know. I can't. And honestly, it's amazing the things you do when you're young, because you're fearless. And it wasn't so much a knockback. It was just like, God, give me time here. I don't want to come to Liverpool in the same situation as what those other apprentices are. I want to come as someone that's played a few games. I think I ended up playing 13 games, starting 13 and being involved in a lot more. But I felt I went as a bit of a man rather than as a kid. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
So I went and stayed in digs. Sometimes I cry myself to sleep. I can't lie because I'm missing my mum and dad. But I just had a I just had a goal that I wanted to be a footballer. That's all I wanted. And I thought nothing's going to stop me, no matter how difficult it's going to be. And you've got to have tough times. And I had to suck it up and get on with it. And it was incredibly hard. And listen, you guys know what it's like.
See, before we come to, I want to go back to Liverpool in a minute, but see a lot of youngsters nowadays, Jamie, it's as if the parents, they want to be seen as, oh, they're at a big club, and they'll drive them to, especially up here, Rangers, Celtic, they'll bypass all the smaller clubs. It's probably the same down south. You said you wanted to go to Liverpool as a man, but was that a decision where you thought, or what advice would you give to any youngster now? Is what I'm trying to,
Yeah, I think that's a great question, mate, because, I've got an 11-year-old boy that plays. He's a nice player. He's at, I live 10 minutes from Chelsea's training ground here, Boydy. So, I take him there. He's on the books. He's just been offered another year, which is brilliant for him. He can play in his own right. I have to push him sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I think the pitfalls and the outside influences are totally different to what we had as kids. I know Snoddy's obviously younger than we are, but we didn't have the Instagram. We didn't have the ability to go and play a computer game with any kid anywhere and around the world. So football was our life. So I think it's probably in a way more difficult now because, as I say, there's so much more going on. But I think if you look at it, it's all about the individual. If you feel as a kid you're strong enough to go and handle a Rangers, a Celtic, a Liverpool, or Chelsea, you can take it on absolutely fine. If you're that, if that's how you are. If you're the sort of boy that maybe gets lost with a lot of great players, and you're maybe not going to develop being like a small fish in a big pond, then it's maybe not for you. And I think that's where parents have to be incredibly careful that you don't just look at the club. You look at what's best for your individual little boy, because there's a kudos of playing for a Man United or a Liverpool or Rangers, Celtic that comes with sometimes a bit of pressure, a bit of peer pressure from other mums and dads because they're winning every week, like Chelsea win every single game. But what I will say about the coaches there, boys, they're unbelievable. They're so good with the kids technically. They work on all the right things. I never once have to go, oh, we've got to do something there because they're not working on that with you. They're brilliant. They really are.
See, when you're saying there about, you had the pressure, obviously, for your uncle, your dad. Do you feel as if your son's going to have the same pressure, obviously, by having you as his dad,
Yeah, maybe, mate. And if anything, probably more, because my dad didn't have the, when I was playing at Liverpool, my dad, you're Jamie's dad. Now I'm Harry's son again, since he's been in the jungle and that, mate. You know what I mean? So he's like, and he loves it. You can't get him off the TV. I thought, that. But no, of course there'll be a little bit of pressure because of, everything that goes with it. But he's a really smart kid. He's bright. He sort of gets it. I don't know what goes on in his mind, but every now and again, I'll just tell him that I want him to enjoy his football and just, the only I will say, there's no shortcuts. You've done it. You two have played at the top level. And that's what I say. If you want to be a footballer, or if you don't make it as a footballer, the only person you can blame is yourself if you don't work hard enough. Because I never say a word to him. The only time I tell him after a game, I don't care if he's done a trillion skills and they didn't come off, but if he doesn't work hard, that's the only time I say that's not good enough. Because I don't care what you do, we can all have off days, but you can always work hard, you can always run around. And I think that's just what I try to install in him. Just work as hard as you can. And you never know what can come from there.
See, on that as well, Jamie, how important do you think it is now for young kids, like 16, 17, they've maybe been in they've had a career because they've been in the youth academies from maybe 8, 9, 10-year-old. They've had a good 10-year career. If they don't make it, how important is it that they get either a club that suits them, maybe further down, down the leagues, or they go and at least try something else now? Because we're losing far too many talented kids in the game of football now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, we're going to lose a lot right now because there'll be clubs that are making decisions on players at sort of 16, 17 that maybe would have took 15, 16 kids, but they're probably thinking because of what's happened with the coronavirus and maybe looking at the finances, there'll be a lot of good players that maybe get let go by clubs because they're just looking at the future. And I think it's just important that you just keep believing. I think you and I were talking the other day about big Virgil van Dijk. Now, everyone's got that perception, maybe that he didn't work hard, maybe not enough as a kid. That's why he never meant to the top early on. But the penny dropped in the end. And my point is, there's not always, not everyone's on the red carpet. Not everyone goes through one up after another. And, this situation where they're playing for England schoolboys, Scotland schoolboys, 15s, 16s, 18s, 21s, 23s, B, whatever. There are people that have setbacks, and it's how you react to those setbacks. And any kid that's watching this now, it wasn't easy for the three of us. I'm sure, Snoddy said he had a difficult time and he ends up at Leeds, and obviously his career went, through the roof since then, and he become a Premier League player. And that's really but there's a lot of highs and lows that people don't quite see. So I think it's so important that you keep working hard. You always believe good influences around you. And if you're not good enough in the end, make sure that's because that was just someone else's opinion. But do everything you can and work harder than anybody else. And I think that's been I've noticed this sort of theme in the last 8 weeks of talking to different players. Is the ones that got to the top were the ones that worked harder than anyone else. They were the ones that wanted it a little bit more because, as I said, I always say it to my kids or whatever they want to be. There's no shortcuts. You want to be successful, you've got to work harder than anyone else.
Jamie, see when you obviously we get back to it, we just touching on that what he says, but was there ever setbacks through your Liverpool career? I know you had obviously the injuries and stuff, but was there ever setbacks, and was there any older pros that gave you some valuable advice?
Yeah, I think John Barnes was a massive help for me, actually, Snoddy. As a kid, John was one of my heroes, and when I signed the first day I got there, they in those days, you got to Anfield in the mornings, and then the reserve team players, it was a 17 or 18-year-old, you go in the reserve team dressing room, and then the first team would go to the first team dressing room. Ronnie Moran, who was a great guy, great coach, big help in my career, would then shout to everybody, like, away the new, which was just saying as if to say, right, here we go. You'd walk back up the tunnel. Remember at the Anfield, how it used to be? You'd walk back up that tunnel, and then you get on this old bus, and then you go to Melwood and train. Then you get back on the bus and come home. So I'm a 17-year-old kid. I've got long hair. I think everybody probably thought, look at this flash cockney, which is, I certainly wasn't, but you could have certainly thought I was. And I remember sitting down on this old bus, and then they go, like, no, you can't sit there. That's Ronnie Whelan's chair. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get off the seat and I go and sit in another one. No, you can't sit there. That's Steve McMahon's seat. And anyway, they've got me going round and round on this bus. I don't know where to look, where to go. And in the end, John Barnes called me and said, come here, mate. Come and sit next to me. So John sat next to me, saved me. You can imagine how I was sweating. It was freezing cold. It was the middle of winter. I got sweat coming down my face. I just wanted the world to swallow me up because everyone's laughing. It's probably they started to everyone. And then John just said, listen, I've heard a lot about you. I heard you can play a little bit. If you ever need anything, let me know. I mean, he got me in a bit of trouble a few times as well and a few nights out. But he was always a great influence to me. And he was everything that, you'd want from a senior player. And I tried to become that person as I got older. I thought, I want to help the likes of Steven Gerrard and players because John was just incredible. He never got the credit he deserved. He was such an amazing footballer.
See on that, Jamie, are you surprised that it didn't quite work out for him, especially up here with John and Kenny when they joined Celtic as a management team?
Yeah, I do. I certainly was. I mean, it was a tough time, I suppose, for in terms of managing the club, and Kenny was there with him. I thought it would have got better because he's such a fond. He's got a great knowledge of the game, and I often said to Dad was once or twice going to meet. I think when he went to Portsmouth, Dad was going to ask him to come and be an assistant, but he lived in the Wirral area, and he didn't really want to make that move. But John's knowledge is incredible, and a good human being. He's a nice man, and he really helped me because even when he was coming to the end of his career, and I started to play ahead of him, he'd always sit down and have chats about my game and explain what he should be doing from a midfield player's point of view.
Why you go down the coaching role?
My dad always used to say to me, you should get into the coaching because he knows I live for the game. But I think it was a case of when I retired, I retired at 31, and it was a difficult one because of my knee and everything like that. And it was a real eye opener for me because all of a sudden I was like, wow, what's next? What am I going to do? Because you're a long time retired. We're very fortunate though that we've got money behind us, which helps because it's not going to last forever. So you've got to get on with something else. You've got to turn your hand to maybe, trying to be a football pundit. And I went to Sky and I've absolutely loved it since. My dad always says, like, why don't you coach? Or, you should get do your badges. And then they say to me, what are you doing next week? And I go, I'm going to Pebble Beach to go and play golf with my mates. He goes, that's why you're not a man. That's why you're not a coach or a manager. So there are, and I've got involved in the league of their own stuff. And I've been really lucky. I've been so lucky with, since I've retired. Because it could have gone the other way, and it could have been something that perhaps didn't work out for me, and I've made some good decisions.
Jamie, you mentioned about John Barnes trying to mentor you, and you obviously you said there about Steve. How was he as a kid?
He's different class. Straight away, I remember the first day at training, he came and joined in. Gerard Houllier brought over 2 players. A young lad called Stephen Wright. I don't know if you remember him. He had a career, but he did so well. He went to Sunderland, right back. And Gerard Houllier said he was the one, want to look at this kid. They're going to bring another little boy to train with him who's 16, 17. So we had a practice match. Stephen Wright's playing right back. Stevie Gerrard ends up playing in the same midfield as me against Paul Ince, and I come out of Patrick Berger or someone. So I've got the ball. First couple of minutes, I passed it into him, hoping he'd send it back, and I just like whip it out to the left back or to the left winger. Anyway, he's turned, got on the half turn and hit this pass, and it was, you know, like that noise. I went, wow. And it's gone straight to someone's feet. Didn't deviate, straight through the air. And I was like, wow, this kid can play. 2 minutes later, he's gone smashing into Paul Ince. Then he's driving past people. And Gerard Houllier come up to me in the game and went, cool, what do you think, the right back? I went, right back? Are you watching the same game as me? I said, what about the kid in midfield? He's different class. I said, he's the best I've seen. I said, the right back's going to be all right. This kid's a winner. And he was like, oh, yeah, you think so? I was like, listen, we all know so. If you can't see that, you don't know football. And Stevie, from then, it was just like only a matter of time.
He was tough.
The thing that set him apart, boys, was that he had this unbelievable pace, like unreal. When we used to do like roll, you know, like when the first time I noticed it, boys, was when, you know, that thing where you sort of run out and he sort of jog back and then you roll into another sprint. I remember being up against him thinking, my God, this kid, like, because he had funny feet. He didn't move like a normal athlete, but he covered ground like you couldn't believe. Not far off Michael Owen pace. When those two have a race, it wasn't far off. And that's what set him apart for me. It wasn't just the bravery. It wasn't the skills or the shots. He had a yard of pace. And I think for all the great midfield players, that's what they have. You know, there's a few that could do it without it because they manipulate the ball so well. But Stevie was lightning quick. And he never really got credit for how quick he was.
Did you take on this sort of mentoring role, you and probably a few of the older boys, to try and, you know, you knew you had probably something special in your hands, to try and mentor him into be the player that he is?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I liked him as a kid. I mean, for just one reason or another, those days they used to clean the boots. So Stevie used to clean my boots. And he had a bit about him. You know, I remember one day, you know, I said, look, Christmas time, what do you need? I'll get you some stuff for you, you know, your brother. And what do you need? What size are you? He went 7s, 8s, 9s or 10s. He was like, you know, it was just... I've
done that before. I used to go up to 14.
But he was just, you know, he had a bit about him and he was great fun and a smile because he's, you know what we see sometimes with Stevie, we see a serious side, you know, and he is a serious football man, but he's also got a real, you know, he's got a sense of humour. He's very funny and we had some great times. And I certainly tried to help him. And I think he's mentioned it before in his book and stuff like that. But it was just because it's like anything. I'll only help him if he's a good lad. I mean, if he was someone that I thought had talent, but there was absolutely no chance, you know, you don't waste your time. But when someone's a good lad, they want to learn. And he had his insecurities like we all have, because you look at him and think, you know, like he's superhuman at times, but he's still, you know, he'd have his doubts and you had to, you know, I think he certainly responded to the carrot and not the stick.
Did you see him get into management?
Sorry, on you go, boy.
Did you see him get into management?
I wasn't sure. I thought it's a little bit like Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard. I thought they got the perfect life. They've had a great career, won everything. I could see them just doing punditry, take the easy option, but they haven't. They've gone in there at the sharp end. Stevie's doing well up there. It's not easy, you know, because you're up against, you know, every week, you know, with Celtic being so strong, and Frank as well the same. I was surprised, but he's got it. You know, you can see he's got it. He's got it in him, you know. And I think, you know, a few years at Rangers, and as long as he doesn't make, you know, too many mistakes, I think it's only a question of time before he manages Liverpool when Jurgen Klopp retires.
Let's go back to the start of your own career. Like when you moved, how, like, you know, Kenny signed you, and then you had Graham Souness coming in as well. And I mean, how daunting was that?
Well, I tell you, probably the most difficult thing, and when I think back, what I was probably most proud of was when I was a 17-year-old. Kenny signed me. At the time, I think I was probably the most expensive teenager. I'd, you know, a lot of pressure, and then after about 3 or 4 weeks, Kenny left, and it was incredibly difficult to deal with because I'm like, now the manager that I'd signed for, because as much as I signed for Liverpool, I signed for Kenny. Because he was incredibly kind to me. He called, you know, when I was at Bournemouth every weekend on a Sunday, he'd call, how'd you play? What, you know, tell me about your game. And he'd ring my dad and, you know, when does he want to come up? Anything he needs. So they couldn't have been any kinder to me. And then he obviously had a lot of problems in terms of, he dealt with so much, Kenny, not just as a manager, but he'd obviously had Hillsborough. And I think that must have really taken its toll. So when he left, all of a sudden I'm going, wow, what's going to happen to me now? I'm stuck out there, and I'm not going to be getting the next manager might not like me. So all those insecurities and doubts as a 17-year-old.
Did you have any problems within yourself there, mentally, your mental health side of it? Massively. I cried. I used to cry my eyes out. But in those days, we're not. I think it's a lot better where you have people to talk to. I used to go back to my digs, and I stayed right by Anfield with a lady called Mrs. Sainsbury, and Don Hutchison was there with me, and Hutch was as mad as they come. But in a way, it helped me because we'd have a good laugh, and I think that was something you needed just to cheer yourself up, because I was doubting whether I'd ever play for Liverpool. There was, they had a guy, Wayne Harrison. I thought he passed away a few years ago, but he's similar sort of path to me, that he signed for Liverpool, didn't quite make it, and I was always like, I don't want to be that guy that goes back to Bournemouth with his tail between his legs. And Graham Souness then come, and in fairness, Graham didn't really, he didn't talk to me. He didn't know who I was. He hadn't signed me. And you know what it's like as players, boys. When the manager signs you, you're straight to the top of the tree. And I wasn't. I was some young kid that he perhaps didn't know about. What he didn't know my dad. There was there was nothing he was going to do for me unless I did it myself. And then I ended up making my debut against Auxerre that came from nowhere. I don't even know where it came from. I'd been training well with the reserves. I got called up to the first team, and he was like, "You're playing tomorrow." And I was like, "Wow. That's come from nowhere." And I just went to Auxerre. We lost 2-0, but I played okay, held my own. And then he sort of went from there. And it wasn't, but I tell you, it was tough, because Liverpool is tough love. I had Phil Thompson as my reserve team manager, and Tomo doesn't mess about. I mean, he's not the sort of guy to put his arm around you. How you feeling? I just want to go and see your family for the weekend. That wasn't how that club went. That how it was. And I think that's where football's changed a lot now. I know it's changed. It's definitely changed now. But do you look back now and no regret the part? Like, do you look back and say, if I'd been playing now, I might have been a better player. If I'd been able to. I know you got in the team, you had a fantastic career. If it wasn't for injury, you'd went on to be one of the best. But like, in terms of when you go back then and you're maybe looking for that arm round the shoulder, do this, do that. But that wasn't the way it was back then.
No, completely different, Boyd. It was just a different experience altogether. But it's certainly, I think what they would probably say is that they were preparing you for playing in front of 45,000 people, and it was tough. You're playing for Liverpool. All the I wouldn't say ghosts in the past, but all the great players that have played in my position, captains and leaders that have won everything. And I suppose that was the way they'd looked at it. It was, if you were injured or you weren't playing, it was like, you're no use to us. So it made you mentally tough. It certainly, there were probably kids that were really talented that it finished because they couldn't handle that. They couldn't handle that sort of tough love approach. I was lucky that I had my dad, and I'd go, I'd speak to him, and he'd keep me going at times. And I had a really good older brother that.
How was this, Jamie? How was those conversations? Like, because when you look at it, your dad was part of that generation of the tough love, and you're phoning him and Dad, this is happening. Like, how was those conversations? Because I'm sure he would have been like, listen, you need to get on with it, son.
A little bit, but I think that there were times when I remember, going back to Bournemouth a few times and getting back in the car to go back up the M6. And to some people, they might go, well, listen, Mac, what's wrong with you going to play for Liverpool? Anyone would give anything for that. But when you're a kid at 17 years of age, and you're missing your mum and dad, and I've not had things weren't going great. I wasn't playing well. I think a lot of the players, maybe there was a few people in the reserves that doubted me as well, because my confidence was starting to go. And that was when you've really got to dig deep as a person. And I'm when I look back now, that's probably, as I say, I get so much pride from that the fact that I stuck at it, and I ended up having 11 years there, captain the club. And there are moments where you look back and think, wow, you were tough. You handled that situation, because I know a lot of people would have not been able to do that.
What sort of stuff are you saying there? What do you think that really pushed you on to say, I want to get in the first team and stay there? What sort of stuff would you say that, was it just a work ethic, or was it a determination?
Yeah, I think it's both, mate. I mean, it's hard though, because we're talking about ourselves. It's not very often we talk about ourselves. We're so used to asking about other people, but
I've watched you for the last 4 weeks in Sky, and that's all you've done.
I love training. I love the game, and I think that was my one thing that I always, and I think that got me through it, because as I say, at Liverpool, when I first went there, what they used to do is you get back on the bus. The other flip side, you go back to the training ground. Back to Anfield, and everyone would just get changed and go home. And I've been brought up as a kid with my dad going, you got to go out there and do your extras. You got to do your sprints. You got to do your ball work. You got to run. You got to learn the game. So I'd just get back in the car, get a bag of balls, and I'd go back to the training ground and do my bit. And I know people were going, "Oh, you know, he's just an arse licker. You know, are you just trying to?" And I was like, "That's all right. That's fine. You can say what you like about me, but I want to be a footballer, and nothing's going to stop me." You know, and I would go back and I'd work harder than anybody else. And I maybe, you know, at times looking back, the reason why I maybe got injured because I did too much. I probably got in the first team. I was playing 40 games a season as a 18, 19-year-old, and my body wasn't ready for that. And that's maybe what I would have changed, because I picked up injuries, a lot of growing in, you know, I had knee problems, like 10, 15 operations on my knees. I broke my ankle. And I think my body, perhaps now, with your situation, Snoddy, I think they'd have managed me differently, because they'd have realised when my body wasn't right, and that's when I picked up injuries. Playing for England, I broke my ankle twice, hamstring. I mean, I always, and maybe I used to get so anxious because I wanted to do so well.
Yeah, of course.
See, on that, when you speak about the injury side that you want to do so well, like, did you feel as if you were always having to prove yourself? You know, like front of the cop when you're there. Did you feel as if it was a pressure on you to continue? And was it because, I mean, I know you spoke about Graham as your manager. He played in that position. He was probably all over you every single game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was certainly a pressure to be fit and, you know, and play as many games as you can. But I thought you know, looking back, Liverpool, my injuries seemed to come through. If I go through my career, I mean, what cost me 3 or 4 years of my career was England. Mm-hmm. And I think when you talk about, you know, mental health and how I used to handle things, I used to get so uptight playing for England. It's not a coincidence that you could have that amount of time. Like, cost me 3 or 4 years of my career. You know, two broken ankles, hamstrings. And I used to remember, and I don't know what you guys were like, playing for England and of Scotland was like, the nerves, it would consume me for the week. If I could have found a way to control those nerves, I'd have been a totally different player. Like I remember, you know, being next to Robbie Fowler or David Beckham and people like that, and I'd watch them, they'd be reading the programme like 20 minutes before the game, and I was like, I wish I could be like that. You know, I'm playing it over and over in my head. I'm sleeping. I can't sleep before the game. Whereas at Liverpool, at home, at Anfield, I felt comfortable. I didn't really get that many injuries playing for Liverpool. It was more the England side that cost me. And I used to get fans always saying... Do
you look back and say, maybe... I mean, I don't know if you did you speak to anybody? Like, and try to control maybe your anxiety or stuff? Like, maybe if you look back and, you know, I'm trying to, for any young footballer out there, like right now, who might be experiencing the same things, would you say maybe speak to someone in terms of how to deal with your anxiety or stuff when you're in these big pressure moments?
100%, 100%, Matt. I think it's a great point. But the problem we had in those days, if you did that, it was a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to ever show a sign of weakness. And I think especially when you were playing against big characters and players, I think now players are happy to talk. I think that they're big name players like Raheem Sterling in the England team. You know, Harry Kane might be slightly different. He might not need that. He looks like the sort of character a bit like Alan Shearer, where he's so driven, tunnel vision. He knows what he needs, but everyone's different. And I'm sure you boys have been in the dressing room when you've gone, you know, the perception might be that someone's maybe a little bit weaker, but he's not. He just needs a little bit of help, and maybe just someone to talk through things and get that little, just to find out how to deal with the nerves or the feeling of, you know, what's going on in your life and how to handle things, you know. You missed
the 2001 treble season, Jamie, with injury. Looking back over that, how was that mentally to cope with that?
Weirdly, it wasn't so much I got made captain, I think, so obviously the year before, and things were going really well, and I could see like Steven Gerrard was coming through, but I felt he would have been the perfect partner for me in terms of our relationship, and I would have loved to have had. That was one big regret that I didn't play enough with him. I sensed that once I got that injury, my last game was the England-Scotland game when Don Hutchison scored. That was my last game for England, and I realised then.
What was the score that day?
I think we went through, but I can't remember what that score was.
I was just checking.
But Big Hutch scored a great goal. I tell you what, I knew. Like, you know, when you guys, there was a moment and my knee kept clunking, and it was just giving me a terrible feeling. And I remember getting a scan, and I had a massive hole in the knee, like a chondral defect, they call it. I had no meniscus. I had my meniscus taken out when I was 18. So I knew I was in trouble, and I was on borrowed time. And that was a case of then it became, I'm just going to have a, not be mercenary about it, it's probably the wrong word, but it was just a case of just trying to get contracts and play. I never got back to any level after the England-Scotland game. And that was really hard to take when you're playing against players who are not as good as you, but they're fitter. And I couldn't train them. I could only train on a Thursday because I had to get my knee, in terms of getting the swelling down. I went to America for surgeries and, I missed so much time of football. And it was difficult to take.
See that, Jamie, touching on it. Did you go and see Wolfart? You've seen Maradona's physio. You spent a lot of times and they were, Wolfart, he's obviously known in the game, the Bayern Munich stuff, the lads use it stuff as well. What levels did you actually go to try and come back?
Oh, mate, you name it, I saw him. I saw faith healers. I used to say before the game started, I was like, Lord's Prayer. All right. Look, do you know what, Snoddy? I tried everything. There wasn't anything. No lengths I went to try and, play. I mean, I remember saying the Lord's Prayer in the dressing room at Anfield sometimes because I thought that might help me. Someone said if you start doing that, there was nothing I didn't do. I'll go to see surgeons all around the world. I went to Germany, and then I ended up going to.
You went to Naples,
Dr. Stedman, who did my knee a few times, and he gave me at least another couple of years. But I also saw some people that just, completely ruined my career. And I look back now and I think, why did I let you operate on my knee? You ruined my career. I probably, if I'd have gone straight to America, I might have got to 34, 35. But, these things happen.